Okay, I think we're set now. All right, so the first thing that we have on the agenda is the retiree health insurance update. So I just wanted to just tell you where we are with that. We've done, I think it's been pretty well received. We've had a lot of questions. I've done a lot of visiting by phone, with retirees, and they're actually having a great time in the meetings, seeing each other in the Zooms and in person. They're having a great time with it. It's been a lot of fun, actually, but I think it's been well received. We've had 2 Zoom information sessions, and Brown and Brown, I think, has done an excellent job with those. We had 1 in-person meeting, and as I said, we've had a lot of phone calls. I know Brown and Brown is getting a lot of phone calls with clarifications, and people seem to be happy with the responses. And we do have a variety of information available on our website, including one of the Zoom sessions was recorded. So if anybody missed it, they can go back and listen to that Zoom session. So we have that. We have the overview of information there. There's also an interactive tool on there where the retirees can go check their providers. They can also check their medication listing to make sure that that is covered on there. So yeah, so they have, the Brown and Brown has done a really good job, I think, of getting information to people. And they said that about 97% of the providers around the country are covered. So and those who pay in towards the plan, and some of them do because their spouse is covered as well. It is a significant savings for them because the plan is so much less expensive. So I think that that's appealing to a lot of people also. If they can get the same coverage and pay, $58 a month as opposed to almost 200, that's appealing. So, but that's where we are with that. I don't know if you've heard anything or if you have any questions, but you'll see some of the approvals on the financial memorandum, which we'll go over next. And that, so we have the financial memorandum, and then we also had the addendum. So the financial memorandum is mostly routine items. The BOCES service agreement on there, for some reason that Madison Oneida BOCES wants a separate, board agreement on there, but in general, we do, we have our firm commitment with BOCES, and so that's what you sign, but they want a separate one. So it's on there, and it's for the family ID, which we do use. And so then the other health insurance related things are the Brown and Brown broker of record. So that makes them our broker. We don't pay them extra, and they were solicited by Broome Tioga BOCES. That wasn't somebody we went out to get, but the consortium is having them work for the whole consortium to get this information together. So they're the broker of record. It's included in the premium. There's no additional fees or anything like that, but we do have to appoint a broker. And then the BTD Medicare Advantage plan is, your approval to let us be a part of that plan in our consortium. So that's what we're marketing now to our retirees. And then the Eastern Heating and Cooling, we had some, changes with that, but now that's just our HVAC and controls. Just preventative maintenance that we do annually. Now, I know that there's some talk of day automation, changing some things over. So there is a clause in here where we can get out of the contract, whenever we need to, as things turn over. The addendum to the financial memorandum is our property tax report card. And that's the required reporting to New York State after our budget is adopted. That's due April 26th, but since we won't have another meeting before that, what I'm asking you to do is approve the budget first, and then this will be after that. So that's why the budget is on the agenda first. And then, and this just goes through the budget amount, it just tells people that we are not going over the property tax cap, gives a little bit of enrollment information, and then it goes through our reserves, so our fund balance reserves. And every year in April, we update our reserve plan in more detail, but this is just the summary reporting to New York State. So you'll also see that our own details for our school district that we post on the website. That'll be coming through in the next board meeting, not tomorrow's, but. So that's why the property tax report card was put on there, so that we could get it in and filed in time. So were there any questions on the financial memorandum? Oh, Amy has company. Okay, so if we don't have any questions on that, I sent you the details that will be posted Thursday morning, and that's the 50, I think it's a 50 slide presentation. That it's a PowerPoint that I won't be going through, but we'll put that on the website. And then there was another one that covered just the revenues, and that goes through, if you had a chance to look at it, it's, you know, the current year budget compared to what we're proposing. And then it also gives, I think, 5 years of history, so that people can kind of see, you know, what's included in each budget code, and what it has looked like over the years for us. Obviously, this year is a different ball game, but for the most part, you'll see that most of them are pretty consistent. So I think that's, you know, that gives a lot of information, but it's a, you know, it's too much to go through, and nobody wants you to read numbers to them for 50 slides long anyway. So that will be posted out there. We'll also be putting together a budget booklet that we do every year that has our school district report card. It has all kinds of budget information, history. It's in a different format so people can see, and it shows the change and percentages and things like that too. So that'll be coming out also. So we'll have a whole lot of information that we'll be pulling together and posting on the website after the approval of the budget. But right now it's not on there, so that it's not confusing in case anything changed. And right now I'm gonna share my screen so you can see the PowerPoint revised without the transitions. And then I just want to go through that so that way, if there are any questions, we can address them today before we go through this tomorrow. So I'm going to share my screen. And can you see that? Okay. So let's go through. I'm going to start it from the beginning. Okay. From beginning. Okay. There we go. All right. So this is just the summary overview. I did fix those transitions. They won't be like that tomorrow, I promise. So they're deciding, you know, obviously what we have settled on for the budget amount, the bus, and the 2 board members. And that's just, that's what we talked about last time. So that's a duplicate slide except that the budget number has been finalized. So the goals of the spending plan, I actually have no idea why this is transitioning, because I came in early to fix that, and I must not have saved the right, I didn't email myself the right one. Okay. So we do have a responsibility to, obviously, a number of taxpayers, students, staff, community. So, you know, there are a lot of stakeholders that we answer to, that we're responsible to. And I think that this budget is a responsible plan. It does a good job in representing all of our stakeholders. You know, we have to look for those educational opportunities. We have to really be careful with the state of the economy and future or unknown state aid implications. You know, we want to keep the tax levy responsible. Got a lot of mandates that, you know, a lot of costs get shifted to the district. we obviously will take care of those, but we also want to have the best possible program. And I think this does that. Our equipment and things like that have been a little bit neglected, so we need to get back on track with that also. And maybe that's something, some of that federal stimulus one-time shots can help us with. So the last time we met and we had a presentation, we were about 1.2 short. So how did we get from there to balancing our budget? We had, as the costs came in, as the revenues came in, we just made the minor adjustments, in real time. And then we did get some additional state foundation aid. They also filled in the gap that they had used last year. You may recall we had some federal funding, and they were proposing using some of that federal funding for state aid. So that went away. So we did get some additional state aid. So there's some federal funding in there, which you'll see that we don't have the guidance on yet. We have an idea. It will have to go over multiple years, and that will be in the form of grants, really. So we'll be applying for those funds as a special aid, as a grant. So what we may end up doing is pulling some things out of the budget that fit that criteria. But for right now, that's going to balance our budget, and we know that some of these things we need to do anyway. So, for example, the enhanced education for what people miss. So maybe that's summer school. So maybe we pull that out and record that in the special aid fund. But for right now, we know we need it, so we want to leave it in our budget. But that's how that will be handled. So this year, they wanted the federal funding, the same kind of funding that they're talking about this for our current year. They said, no, we want that in the general fund. And then my understanding is for next year, they want it in a different fund, pulled out separately so you can track it separately. So we also, in order to balance the budget, we took a couple $100,000 out of the health insurance benefit line, because there will be significant savings. I think it will be more than that, but at this point, we don't know who will switch over. We did take some savings out of there, but not potentially all of the savings that we may have, which will help us in future years. So, okay, so that's that. And then this slide is just something to go. It compares year to year and the changes, so you can see how we're paying for that expenditure plan. So, and I did go over a 2-year line so that people could see that, even over 2 years, if you average it over 2 years, we haven't gone up a lot. You may recall this current budget we're in, it was actually a decrease from the prior budget. So, we're trying to catch up on some things that maybe got neglected, but this is how we're paying for it. There's not much property tax increase, as you can see. Our pilots and penalties are going up a little, and that's just a change, over the years. Some of the pilots change in percentage. Sometimes they pay 25%, and then the next year they might go to 30%, things like that. We did lose the incarcerated youth contract. Cooperstown dropped it a couple years ago, and Delhi is dropping it for next year. So that's the loss in revenue there. And you'll see in the detailed budget that we'll be absorbing some costs because, we had some of our personnel working in that program that we still have our personnel, but we don't have that offset anymore. And honestly, it made sense because, Delhi and Cooperstown were paying us, and there are not a lot of incarcerated youth. So really they were paying us for a service we weren't providing, not that we wouldn't, but there wasn't anybody to service. So, so the other revenues line, that consists mostly of the BOCES refunds, and we did decrease some of the interest. Our state aid, and you see that we had the foundation aid increase, as I mentioned, and the pandemic adjustment from the prior year that was filled in by federal funds. The state is filling in. So that's why that looks like a big jump there. So it was funding that would have been federal, except they got more. So now we're calling it state. And then the federal revenues, you can see that $482,000 is what we had to account for in the general fund this year. And then 711 of, there's a pretty significant amount. It was 1.6 million and 2.9 million in federal funds. And that's what we don't have the guidance for yet. But out of that, that's where I'm getting the 711,000. We know it will be, it will have to be used over multiple years. So that's why that we're not going to put the whole piece in there. And then, as I said, some of that, once we get the criteria, we will, take care of some one-time things because as Jamie had mentioned earlier, this is not going to be recurring revenue. So we don't want to throw all of it in there and then, have to scramble to come up with it later. The fund balance is the same. We're proposing $1 million. And just to keep in mind, that's not a revenue. It's really a savings account. But that just goes through the general categories of how we're balancing this budget and how we got to where we are. This just summarizes where we are as far as the budget plan goes. And so our spending plan is up a little bit under 1.2 million, and that is a 2.86% increase in our spending. So it's not a huge, it looks like a big number, but it's not a huge percentage of our budget. So let's see. So this is our proposition, and we do bond the buses now over 5 years, which aligns with the state aid. And our state transportation aid ratio did go up slightly. After they take out all the things that they say are not allowable, you will probably get about 65% of that back for the buses over 5 years. So the highlights in the general support category, that's up about 159,000. That maintains all of our current positions. We did put a truck in there for grounds. The BOCES administration and capital costs, that was a pretty, I think it was a significant increase. And then we had some increased costs for outside service contractors, our annual preventative maintenance, which you've seen, on the financial memorandums. So that's the highlights of that increase. The highlights of the instructional increase, we're replacing all the positions vacated through retirement. That does add a special education teacher. And you may recall in the current budget, we did cut out equipment purchases. So those are going back in. The requests, we're not just adding line items, but people have requested equipment. That includes the BOCES occupational education program, which there was an increase, pretty significant increase there. And that's based on a 3-year enrollment of our own students that go there. So it is for our students. We added summer school, and this is related to equipment also, but we added the hardware line back in that we took out last year. And we've added a lot of softwares this year, but I think, they've been really, really super helpful to the teachers teaching remotely. So a lot of them we found were really good. So there are a lot of additional softwares in there that weren't necessarily in there before because we didn't know that we needed them. So just a quick overview of transportation again. We are required to disclose when we have this multi-year contract for transportation. So really the slides in there, that's our required disclosure that we're in year 2 of a 5-year contract with Durham. And that will increase by the transportation CPI each year that comes out in June. So just some of the other appropriations that we have, there's no change. We're not projecting a change to the transfer to the school lunch fund or to the summer special education fund. We still will be running the 12-month special education program. And then this is our benefit summary. And as I mentioned, that was one of the ways that we balanced this budget. We took out a little over 200,000 from the health insurance line. And even though there's a 6.5% premium increase for our current health plan, we anticipate that some of the Medicare eligible retirees will switch over to the other plan that costs significantly less to the district. So that's why we just took a portion of that savings, and I feel pretty comfortable with that number. And as I said, I think that there will be more savings that'll help us in the future budgets. So we're also getting a fund balance return from the health insurance plan of about $192,000. So that helps us, or we hope it will help us. We're assuming that it will. Debt service stayed about the same, which is what we want it to do, because our building aid offsets that. So if we have significant changes in debt service, then there's a significant change in our aid. So we like to keep it pretty stable. And that's what fiscal advisors helps us to do. You know, they tell us when it's there's a timing, thing for this is a good time to get a project in because you're going to be dropping off some debt. So now if you get the debt in, everything stays stable, you get your projects done and your aid stays stable. So that's what they help us with. And you can see it is pretty stable right now. This just goes through the changes by category. Just so you get an idea of where our big changes are. And it makes sense that our biggest change was in salaries. Normally benefits would be a piece of that, but as we just talked about, we took some out of the health insurance line. Debt service pretty stable. BOCES, we had some significant increases in some areas, but our special education BOCES costs are down, whether that's, some kids aged out or they're coming back to district program, or that's the plan. Obviously that changes throughout the year depending on the needs of the students that we don't know when we're making the budget, but this is our best guess right now. As we talked about, it adds back the equipment and technology and some contractual items including transportation, but that just goes by the categories of changes. And then we've got the visual for our spending plan. You can see most of it is in program, and that's how it should be. That's where it should be. So that looks consistent. And then just some ending notes that our salaries and benefits continue to be about 70% of our budget. We have information on the website, and there will be additional information. And the link is there, business office budget information. And so what's on there now is anything we've gone through, and the finance committee minutes and recordings are also on our website. So that is it in a nutshell. And this will be posted on our website. I may post it before the board meeting, just as informational so people can follow along. And I don't know if you had any questions about that, or other than the transitions, was there anything that wasn't clear or needed to be changed?
Anything? No.
What's that?
I didn't have anything.
Okay. Okay. So I think that's where we are, and I think we're pretty comfortable with the plan for now.
There's a lot of complexities associated with this budget, as you can imagine. So Lisa, you've done a really great job.
Thanks. Everybody has, putting
Yeah.
it together. I think there's a lot of input. And I do think that for what we know now, that it is a good budget. So, and then we'll, take it as it comes, as we get the guidance from the federal grants.
And it is hard, and I think a lot of people don't, understand or, recognize that, just as Jamie said, that, this is not recurring revenue, because it would be real easy for us to, do all of the things that, ultimately we want to do, and put interventionists in, in our different schools, and hire people for that capacity. But, we can't count on this, these monies for any real extended period of time. So we're just going to remain cautious and follow the guidance, and make smart decisions moving forward.
Yeah, it's kind of telling that they're actually categorizing these revenues as grants.
Mhm.
So as we know with grants historically, they do come and go. So,
Yes, you are right, Jamie.
and a skeptic might say they're sometimes hard to get.
Yeah, a little bit. They're always a challenge, but I mean, it's a pretty significant amount. So we just complain and then keep plugging away at it. But I know, the last round of them, after we submitted on time, then they said, oops, we didn't have the right guidance. So now you have to redo it. And that was when we learned later, after the fact, we learned that we actually had to share that money with the non-public schools. So we had to redo it. But that's why we don't like to jump right in and say, oh, we have all this money and, here's our plan for it, because we don't know until it comes out. And even then, then it changes. So, but it looks pretty good. And I think it's going to help us out a lot. We just don't have the details right now.
Well, it does create a little stability for a period of time,
Mhm.
which is what I think we all have been craving for a while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's why we continue to look at, because it's our job, our responsibility, but that's why we have to continue to look for other ways that we can save. For example, the health insurance. Can we save there and not hurt anything? And if we can, then that helps us in the future years too, when this funding drops off. So.
And that's another thing I'm excited about. And another thing, I certainly appreciate your hard work, Lisa, because I think, I think this is a really strong product, and I think people will recognize it. It's not something being crammed down their throat. There's a lot of information that people have access to, so they can really gauge whether or not it will work for them. But I've been fielding some calls too from some folks who have simply been calling and saying thanks for thinking of us, which has been nice. It's been nice to catch up with some of these retirees that you haven't heard their names in a long time. And at the in-person meeting the other day, it was a little difficult to recognize some people because everyone had a mask on. But it was even nice to see them kind of mingle with each other and catch up a little bit. So
it was a lot of fun at the scanner too, I think, where they're trying to say, okay, where do I stand?
Yeah, sure.
It was a lot of fun, actually.
I thought you were going to say it was hard to recognize people because they had gotten old.
Oh, you know what? Many of those folks still look the same, but it's hard to recognize from here up, so.
Yeah. So, all right. So if there's nothing else, then we'll do this presentation at tomorrow night's board meeting, and I'll post it ahead of time in case anything happens, so that people will have access to it, just in case. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everybody.
All right, sounds good.
Thank you all.
Thank
All right,
Good
thank you,
night.
Lisa.
See you
Good
all
night.
tomorrow.